One sec. Here we go. So I just wanted to say, you know, I'm the person who has the fun job at Athena. I get to watch movies and go to festivals and meet people and try to bring you the best program as possible. But I could not do this without Kitty, who is my partner in all this, and I want to thank her for allowing me to have the creative freedom that I have, and it's just an honor. So thank you. So I saw this movie. Like, my work for next year will begin tomorrow when I go to Berlin, to the Berlinale. And last year, I'm sitting in Berlin. It's my last day. I'm exhausted. And I sat at Difret. And I knew that this movie was one that had to be at the Athena Film Festival. Was I correct? And so I've been stalking them for about 11 months and 27 days to get this movie at our festival. And we finally got it in, and it's, of course, the closing film. And the producer and the director, I'm going to introduce them, they came from Washington, D.C. with a 7-week-old baby. And so let me bring them up here, and I promised Marette that I would hold the baby during the Q&A and I'm going to get their names right, because that's really important, and I wrote them down, and now I can't find where I wrote them down. Okay, right here. Marette Mandefro, is that correct? That's the producer. And Sirsani Berhani Mahari, the director. We are so honored to have you both here. What do you want me to do? Okay, you're fine?
Thank you, guys. Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Lucas.
I think I'm going to do this stand up and bounce, so you can sit down if you want. I think I'm going to keep it bouncing. It's our first festival. Lucas has been to many. So.
I would like you to talk a little bit about the movie and then have people ask you questions.
Sure.
I don't need to ask you questions.
Sure.
All right.
Talk a little bit about how you got this movie made.
Yeah.
Thanks. How'd you get this movie made?
Yeah, so Difret was a labor of love. This project, I've been working on it for over 5 years now. I joined this project in 2009. Zara-san and I started this project in 2007, technically. Z is, classically trained filmmaker, went to USC Film School. I'm actually very non-traditional in my background. I'm a physician by training. And I'd gone through, I came through film through the back door. And about 5 years ago, I was speaking at a health and human rights conference, and Z was pitching his script to some NGOs, of which I have one. And he had, exhausted his possibilities in Hollywood. The script was actually incredibly strong. So when people had offered to buy it in Hollywood, but they wanted it done in English, they also wanted, Hollywood actors, and Z had a very explicit vision of the film to do it in Amharic, cast it locally. And so he said no to all that money, which meant it took longer. But thankfully, when he brought it to me, I read the script, and it was such a page turner, and I was already very, I was already very interested in working on kind of women's issues that I was like, oh, I know how to raise money for this. We're going to do this. So I actually started producing. I was producing the film before I married him, before we had babies and all of that. But, so we always joke that we had twins, actually. Lucas, I was pregnant with Lucas when we went into production. And then Mena came along this year. So do you want to talk a little bit about the story?
Well, so if you want to get married, write a script.
What was your inspiration for this? Like, how did you find this amazing story?
By chance, really. I met Maza Shanafi, sort of, who became the entry point to abduction for marriage for me. In 2005, I was in Ethiopia working on a documentary, and I was at a friend's house, and her brother said, "You should make a film about my sister." I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? I didn't know who she was, and I didn't know the organization that she started. By the time I met her, helped more than 30,000 people, women and children, and it was first of its kind. And we don't even have another one since. I think maybe there's one or two now that they're springing up. And my entry point as a filmmaker is always the characters, right? A young person who started who would have chosen a different sort of career point. She was a judge and left her seat because she thought that the country was ready to move forward in human rights and whatnot. So she started working with the Constitution Commission. In Ethiopia, we had a new government in 1991, so she started working with the Constitution Commission. She wrote the position papers for land rights, inheritance for women, the children's rights, all of that stuff. So, and then after that, she's like, well, in order to do any of that properly, I need to start an NGO that could provide free legal service. And so from a filmmaker standpoint, that is a very interesting character, and you could already imagine what kind of difficulties that she's going to face. So I was already like locked in on that, and then started reading about the organization, and it was amazing. So I found this story, and I left home in May 1996 to go to school, and this particular case happened literally 4 or 5 months after I left. So, and it was also the organization's biggest case then or since, and it kind of put the organization on the map. But it also, this was the first time that the country as a whole had a conversation about tradition, and that was my entry point. Another very strong subject matter to tackle on is tradition. So my entry point is always the characters and the struggles that they face.
And we saw that Angelina Jolie is an executive producer. How does something like that happen?
Yeah. So after like labor, labor in so many ways. After really working hard to try and raise the money, we actually had the finishing cut, and it was about a month before we were going to premiere at Sundance. And we were sitting there, there's all these amazing films that get made, but don't really get out there. And so we were talking with one of the EPs, wouldn't it be great to like try and get someone? And actually our EP's like, I know someone who knows Angelina, this is so up her alley, let's try it. Me and Z were like, whatever. We were so tired at that point, we were like, okay, whatever. We gave the cut, we set the cut of the film and truly didn't think anything of it. And literally like a week later, she called us. We were sitting on the porch, and she called Z and was like, hi, it's Angie. I love your film. And she was so, and she's been amazing at like kind of opening doors and making sure, a foreign language film about Africa. It is a very hard market in America to try and get this film seen. So having her name totally helped in terms of like raising profile and just, getting it known. And she's actually been a wonderful ambassador. She took it with her to the Global Summit on Sexual Violence last June in England, and had like a screening with dignitaries in the UN. She's on the cover of Ms. Magazine this month, actually, talking about our film and the campaign that we're doing about child marriage. So she's been a true angel and so supportive of the film, which it's been awesome.
Great. So why don't we take some questions in the audience right here? I'm going to get student first. Student? Anyone? Students? Come on, we got one back here. I'm not going to let go of the mic. You got to hold on to it. You gotta do it.
Okay, thanks. I was just wondering what you know about how the perception of the people and the elders, the people you were showing in the informal court, if the perception changed after the law changed. Do you know?
Yeah, so customary courts are still kind of a hidden situation in Ethiopia. I think it did change partly because in the area where that incident happened, actually for 10 years there were no abductions whatsoever. So I think, yes, part of the perception changed. But like anything, change takes time, and abduction has kind of creeped up again in different ways. So actually one of the outreach, we have a big outreach campaign that's going to be starting this year. One of the things we actually really want to work with is with the customary courts. A lot of people don't think about kind of those customary courts, but it's the most accessible form of justice, and certainly for women, often their lives get decided in those informal spaces. So we actually want to work within that system with our film to try and kind of start a conversation amongst the elders in that system.
Great. We got a question right here.
It's not a question, it's a comment. I just want to say how moved I was by the profound honesty of this film. That, to me, is its outstanding characteristic.
Thank you.
We got one right here.
Obviously, the first question anybody's got to ask is talk about the cast. I mean, because you have, I guess no one is really an experienced actor, or were there people that were there? And obviously the young girl is not an experienced actor. So talk about how you got to direct them, what background they, you know, what experience did they have with the whole process?
It's a mix, actually. The lawyer, played by Meron Getanet, is a classically trained actor. Been in 10 or 11 movies before we got her, and she had 2 or 3 television shows, and was taking her master's in theater and development at that time. The little girl, Tizita Hagare, that was her first time. She was, it's kind of crazy actually. The hardest part of doing this film was the casting process. All right, Lucas, you know the story. You've been here. All right, don't look at him, okay? Okay, don't look this way. All right. And so that was the hardest part of doing that. So we cast for about 8 months. And no Hollywood would give you time to cast for 8 months, really. But we went to the villages, and then we knew where we wanted to shoot. So in those places where we wanted to shoot, we said, okay, who could we get here that is part of the scene that we want for that, right? So, for example, the customary law scene. For that particular scene, except the judges, the 3 guys, everybody else was from the village. Or actually, the teacher was in, and then the 2 guys who got up and spoke weren't. But everybody else was from that village. So that's how we kind of mapped it out. We went into these villages and then had an open conversation with them. They actually were correcting us, like, oh, this is not how you do it, this is how you... So, because, you know, they've never been in a film situation where they were given a script. So the dichotomy for me was like, okay, well, I want them to say specific things, so how could I get them to say that, you know? But with Tizita, we got lucky. 2 weeks before we shot, we were almost given up, and we weren't going to shoot at all if we didn't have the right person to play her. And because she is sort of the core of the film, she has the emotional trigger that goes on through the film. And so, and it's too much to ask for a young person to play that, right? So you kind of have to find that person already, you know, born with those elements. You know, she was 13 when we casted her, and I knew that I didn't want to overwhelm her, so I didn't give her the script. So we started working on a daily basis. When we meet, you know, I'll tell her exactly what happened for that scene, and so I'll tell her what happened before it, and then what's going to happen after. So we would have a conversation, not really about her, but about the character, Hirut, that is a real person. So she kind of felt like she got to know her as a friend. So she always, you know, talked about the part as third person. So it's not about her. She's actually emulating somebody else's story, which helped us because you can see when you talk to her, and most of the takes were first or second takes.
I just have to say the irony is we actually found Tizita. There are no child parts in Ethiopia, so we were flyering schools. And we found Tizita in Z's old elementary school.
That's true.
Literally.
Yeah.
So taking her first acting class.
And so the movie was qualified for foreign film last year for Oscars. And
This year.
This year, sorry.
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah.
And from Ethiopia.
Thank you.
It was put forward by the the country. And now we're getting ready to release it here in the U.S. and you're going to work on do a whole outreach. So it's in Europe now released and all that stuff. So talk a little bit about what your plans are for release here in the U.S. Who's releasing it? I know you don't have all the semantics and details set, but I think what I want the people in this audience to do is to be the emissaries for Difret so that when it opens, people know about this movie, because these are the kinds of movies that get lost. And we can't let that happen to this movie. So tell us how we can help.
So all this stuff is on Difret.com. We're actually not allowed to announce a distributor yet, but we will. The U.S. actually it was the last territory to sell. It took a long time to sell the U.S. rights, but it is in Europe. It's in all over Italy. It's came out in Switzerland last week. It's coming out in Germany next week, France, Spain. We've done very well internationally. So the U.S. release is supposed to happen in May, I think. So what I would say is just Difret.com. There's all our social media stuff is there. Follow us and find out about us. We're going to post it. We're going to be actually having a soft launch of our outreach campaign. The Ford Foundation and the Packard Foundation have been very generous, and they're funding a 3-year outreach campaign to help use this film as a tool to raise awareness about just this issue of early marriage and violence in women's lives. And in March, we're going to actually bring the real-life heroes to New York for a screening.
At the CSW.
At the CSW. So she's going to come for the first time. She's going to be in an international setting with the film.
It's the Commission on the Status of Women, which is basically an entire week where they're focused on women's. They're 2 weeks, and they could use some help in getting visas for some of the actors. So I told you there was someone in the audience who could help you. She will approach you afterwards.
Yeah, please come talk to us. That's a lot harder than you would think, actually.
Okay, we've got time for one more. What time is it? Is we one more?
Okay, I can hold it.
I know that's part of our deal.
Okay. I'd like to know if the making of the film itself affected the community.
Good question.
I don't know. In a way, because we had 37 different locations. And one of the things that I didn't want to do with this film is to basically point fingers. Before I wrote the script, I did research for about 3 years. So in that research, what I found out is that it's not necessarily a particular village problem, or it's not a particular region problem. It's not. It doesn't. Lucas, please. Okay, you hold it. Okay, hold it. And it doesn't follow any particular religion. And then I found out it actually is not only a problem in Ethiopia. It happens everywhere, and Ethiopia is not even in top 5 of the most offenders in that list. So I kind of wanted to make it broad enough so people can take ownership, because it happens in all corners of our country. So in order to do that, I wanted to make where we go a lot farther and kind of diverse as possible. And also, that was part of the reason why I didn't want to make this film in English. My particular audience was the Ethiopian audience, and I want young girls especially to see this film and find themselves in it and be able to be encouraged by this particular story. So, yes, it affected them in a way that they kind of knew that we were telling a story about something that happens in their village. They all, but it's basic because it happens everywhere. One of the kind of funny stories, when we were doing the abduction scene with the horses, we rented the horses from the village, and we had professional riders because we wanted to do it in a certain way, and also insurance issues, and we didn't want to be liable, And then, so they're like, you guys are doing it wrong. So they literally wanted to get all the guys, the professional riders that we brought from the city to ride the horses, and they wanted to show us themselves how it's done. So they,
So they showed you how they abduct girls.
Right, but, well, you see, you have to understand, because in their context, in that traditional context, it's not something that's bad.
Right.
It is part of life. Right. It happens there, and so it is part of who they are.
But they also tried to show us the when we were doing this, we actually shot in the Supreme Court. They were like, oh no, your robes are wrong, use these. And they like actually pulled out the real robes to use as well.
Okay, I think we have one question in the back, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up. You got a mic over there? Yeah. Go for it. Last question.
Can you
make
talk
it good?
Can you talk a little bit about the reception that you've gotten so far from Ethiopian viewers?
Sure. So our very first screening was actually in the diaspora, was in DC at the New African Films Festival. We are actually based in DC, which is the largest population of Ethiopians outside of Ethiopia. So it was awesome. It was an amazing screening, and people were really blown away. It was, I think, the first time they were seeing a film in Amharic, kind of in that setting. In Ethiopia, actually, we had a 6-week run, and we were completely sold out in Ethiopia. And we're preparing for a wider release there. We haven't shown it in the rural areas, which is where we're actually really interested in, because the divide between the city and the village is quite broad. And this practice actually still happens in the rural area. So I have no idea how that's going to go, but the city screenings were absolutely amazing in the capital city.
Did you guys want to add anything else?
What I'm so excited about is going back to Ethiopia and taking this film as a road show to all these places where there's no electricity, no running water, but this particular story affects this communities, and we have a big plan that Murat kind of designed, where we actually wanted to have like a movie night, with projectors and generators, and then after that have a conversation about what traditions, harmful tradition is like, or should we continue to have this kind of tradition? And one of the things that happened, which I missed because I was in Ethiopia when this case was taking place, was that for the first time that a court case about a young girl was broadcast live on the radio on a daily basis when it happened. So everybody knew about it, and the discussion was at home during dinner and lunch and at schools. So we haven't had that kind of a thing since. Actually, we did recently, where another young girl was abducted and then she died. So I'm hoping that this will reignite that conversation that we need to have as a nation. So,
well, I want to thank you for the honor of having your movie here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And that's a wrap. 2015 Athena Film Festival. Thank you all.